On this episode of Who
I
Dem.
think a lot of people, once again, underestimated what this administration can do in such a short amount of time.
Somebody who's married to an undocumented individual, but yet does not support immigration in any way and thinks these people are freeloading.
What are we ultimately trying to achieve? We have to envision that they're going to return to being normal members of society who can contribute something of value.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start this conversation.
Alrighty. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Who Dem podcast. My name is Damian Galvan, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Representative Gil Cisneros. Representative, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Been back in
Excited
the district all week.
Excited for today's episode?
I am.
Well, today we're joined by Aaron Parnas. Aaron, if you want to give us a quick rundown, just who you are, introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, for sure. So super great to be here with all of you. I am just a TikTok journalist, the best way I could describe it, giving rapid fire breaking news in under 90 seconds or less, 25 times a day to folks on TikTok, Instagram, across social platforms, and just trying to educate as many people as possible about the news in real time.
And how did you get into it?
It actually kind of dates back to, the journalism part dates back to 2022, but my kind of story dates back all the way to 2013 when I first realized that I wanted to just be an advocate and use my voice. But journalism really for me started in 2022 when Russia first invaded Ukraine. I had family in Ukraine at the time, and I just felt as though what I was hearing on cable news here in the United States just wasn't accurately portraying what was actually happening on the ground. And so I did what any 23-year-old does. I pulled out my phone and I started just TikToking what they would share with me, what they would see outside of their window, tanks rolling down the street, planes flying overhead. And next thing you knew, I was breaking stories 45 minutes before CNN was on air. And that's just kind of, the rest is history.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it came naturally to you to just be like, I'm getting this information now, gotta go on TikTok, or did you have to think about it a little bit?
I definitely had to think about it a little bit, but when I started recording, it was kind of natural. I mean, I'm a lawyer by trade, and I made a living talking to a jury of my peers, 12 folks in a courtroom, and just digesting really complicated legal topics in easy, succinct ways of understanding. So this was kind of just second nature for me.
Awesome. And Representative, how did you meet Aaron?
You know, it's rather interesting. My wife had reached out to him about joining a dinner that we threw for some current USC students that are here spending the summer in the District of Columbia, Washington D.C. And you know, generous as he is, Aaron agreed to come to the dinner and actually speak to the students and kind of you know, he mingled with them and you know, told them his perspective on really this growing media here, right? This new media and what it is and how it's changing, how the dynamic is changing, to really be give them all his insight into how things are now and really how you know, really news just isn't the old media anymore, but how it's kind of transforming into this new media and really it's kind of overtaking it. And so we sat together and talked, you know, during dinner and stuff. Found out his wife and I went to I think what
Torrance High.
Torrance High, yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was thinking South, but we went to the same high school, many years apart. But you know, we also share an alma mater in George Washington as well. It's where he went to law school, and so you know, it was just great to meet him and really kind of learn more about his story. And I'm looking forward to him sharing it more of that today with the audience.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm interested because it must be such like a unique position to be so young and close in age to the people that you're now kind of being like viewed as a pioneer in this space. How do you take that in? Like, what's the process like?
Yeah, I've always been kind of called an old soul growing up. I mean, I started college when I was 14, started law school when I was 18, so I was always the youngest in the room, and I was always kind of had to fake it till you make it in a way, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. Even like you just have to like espouse confidence, whether you're online, in a courtroom, in a classroom, and when you're younger than everyone else, or when you're the same age as everyone else, and you have to have people look up to you. You just, if you're confident, then ultimately anything you do will be successful.
So with that, I would love to hear, I guess advice from both of you on this, because for some context here, Aaron, I am 20 years old going into my senior year here at GW.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice from your perspective, doing this now for a little bit longer than I have, obviously accumulating a large following? What would be your advice? And then Representative, what would be your advice to me as well?
Yeah, you just got to use your voice. I mean, that's my biggest advice. The number one roadblock in anything is just actually doing it. I really do love the Nike slogan, just do it. If you don't put yourself out there, if you don't go to that club meeting, or if you don't make that one video, you're never going to see the success you want. There's so many people are often like, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed if I do something that's not perfect, and people are going to laugh at me. I get that, but ultimately the people that are going to look down upon you are the ones that are going to want to have the platform you're building. So just got to do it.
No, and I agree with that 100%. The only other thing I would add, and I think this is what makes Aaron successful, is the fact that he's had real world experience, right? He wasn't some young genius who graduated early from high school and then early from college and law school and then kind of started a podcast, and here we are like on social media, right? He's actually been out there working in the real world, doing work, working as a lawyer, advocating and stuff for different things. And I think that kind of lends credibility to who he is, and allows him to kind of go out there and kind of talk, right, on these issues and different topics. And it does help bring credibility to you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something that's definitely important for my generation, especially with social media. You see a lot of people online, I think, presenting themselves as a lot more knowledgeable on certain issues than I think that they are. I think, in terms of my background as well, I did have the fortune of, working with Cuck Baxter and his immigration law firm down in Atlanta. And that was awesome in terms of, the perspective that it gave me to the immigration system and actually understanding how it works here in the United States, especially with what's going on right now with, the ICE detention centers and Homeland Security broadly. So I wanted to ask you about that, Aaron. What do you think about everything that's going on right now with the current administration?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time. I think a lot of people, once again, underestimated what this administration can do in such a short amount of time. I think that Donald Trump is governing like someone who's not running for re-election, who doesn't have to run for re-election, who doesn't really care what people think about the policies he's instituting. He's just kind of going for broke in a way and seeing how far he can really push the bounds of the law, the bounds of the Constitution, before he gets pushback, whether it's in the courts or even on the ground in the public kind of sphere. I will say, when it comes to immigration, though, that is the one issue, and I think we saw it during the first term with the kids in cages, and now we're seeing it again. It's the one issue that really has broken through in communities across the country. Red, blue communities, doesn't really matter. You had literally a New York Times profile recently of a small town in Missouri, a farm town, that voted for Donald Trump with 80% of the vote, turning their backs on him because ICE detained a local line cook at a waffle restaurant in the community. So I think we're going to see tides start to turn, especially the more kind of the administration tries to fit this square peg in a round hole, because it's just not really working. But I would love to hear the congressman's thoughts as well, from kind of being on the inside over here.
No, I think the cruelty that they are, bringing forth, right, and what they're doing to people is really having an impact, a negative impact towards Trump, in his administration. I read an article recently about an individual who voted for Trump, does not support immigration at all, but yet he is married to an undocumented woman. His wife is undocumented. And she got caught up in So what happened was they tried to find out how they could keep her legally. They found that couldn't happen, and now she's having to go back to her country. But even this individual which is a contrast, in this article, right? Somebody who's married to an undocumented individual, but yet does not support immigration in any way and thinks these people are freeloading that are coming, which is nothing could be further from the truth when it comes to that, because these people do work hard, they are entrepreneurial. And he sees it in his wife, right? His wife came, and when he brought his wife to move in with him, she started a local business doing laundry service. And he's like, oh, why can't they all be like my wife? And the fact is, the vast majority of them are like his wife. But even this individual, as hardline as he is kind of said, what's going on right now is just, it's too much. Pulling families apart, going after them, when they're in hospitals and when they're coming to their court hearings, trying to do what they're supposed to be doing to do it the legal way, and yet they're picking them up anyway. If you're changing the mind of a hardliner, an individual like this, the impact it is having in a negative way is just it's beyond right, and it's not going to be good, and somewhere it's going to break.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to me, the hypocrisy makes sense because as you're describing someone that has an immigrant wife that is against immigration, I think of the president of the United States, who has had 3 immigrant wives and anchor babies here in the United. He's trying to get rid of, naturalization and people being born here, not counting as citizens, yet his children would have been affected by that very policy that he's trying to institute. My
Well,
question.
the other thing about that too, right, is his policy only really, when you think about it, right, only really affects brown and black people of color. They're not going after, as much as I love the Irish and the Irish pubs and everything, they hire undocumented Irish immigrants too, right? People who come here to overstay their visa, they work in these restaurants. They're not going, they're going to the fields, they're going to the car washes, but they're not going to the Irish pubs to kind of raid those places either.
Yeah, no, on the contrary, they're going to museums, Puerto Rican museums, which is really like one of my concerns. I saw you actually break this story, Aaron, in Chicago, where if I'm getting this correctly, ICE agents showed up to a Puerto Rican museum or an area that is heavily populated by Puerto Ricans. And I think this speaks to my larger concern, which is that the Trump administration never truly intended to stop at, the worst of the worst with the criminals. I think that they always wanted to go after their opponents. And I think that that's very clear when you start particularly going after Puerto Ricans who are U.S. citizens by default. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I agree with you that ultimately they do want to go after their opponents, but not necessarily in this immigration context. I think this immigration context is more born out of Stephen Miller's idea that America should be a predominantly white nation. And we've seen that. And because the going after the opponents, that's kind of the DOJ going after Comey and Brennan, and they're going to use that and they're going to do that. But this is a little different, and it's actually a little more sinister when you think about it, because they just want to kind of remove those who don't look like them out of the nation. They want to make America more white. And that's what they're doing. I mean, I don't know if you saw it this morning, but Tom Homan, Donald Trump's border czar, appeared on Fox News, and he said that, among other things that ICE agents can consider to detain an individual for temporarily is their physical appearance. That obviously is unconstitutional. You can't solely detain someone based on physical appearance, but he did say that today. And if ICE agents are kind of being given the opportunity to say, oh, look, he's a brown guy, he might be undocumented, let's just go ask him for his papers, then we're going to get to a point where people are not going to want to come to America anymore for the World Cup, for example, in 26 or the Olympics in 28, because they're going to be scared that they're going to have to show their papers coming into a stadium. You're going to get to a world where people are going to be afraid to go to Puerto Rican museums just because they may be targeted for the way they look. And that's kind of where we're going if it continues this way.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think really they are going after, and they are racial profiling people. They are pulling over, U.S. citizens here in the Los Angeles area and questioning them. And it's always with the, oh, well, you look like somebody, you look like the person we're looking for, right? Which is just somebody, somebody who looks Latino, basically, right? That's their profile that they have. If you look Latino, we're going after you and we're going to stop you. And I was watching one of your videos the other day, Aaron, which is, and you probably saw the same thing I did, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually a different case about, a U.S. citizen. They stopped him, they questioned him, they asked for his ID, they took his ID, and they never gave it back to him, right? And that's, the thing, right? So that the next time he gets questioned, show us your real ID, the individual's not going to have it. So then what? Then they round him up and they take him away.
Yeah. my concern as well is you said, if this continues to happen, obviously they passed the big bad bill. And part of it was, getting millions and millions of dollars, just billions of dollars rather, to ICE to increase their budget. Their budget is now larger than the United States Marines. They have become the largest domestic police force in United States history. Do you think that the reason that Donald Trump decided to do this with ICE is as calculated as he knows that he doesn't have the political capital to do it with the military?
Well, he can't. I mean, I don't think. I actually firmly believe that parts of the United States military would say no if he tries to deputize the United States military and invoke the Insurrection Act. But the military can't legally take on law enforcement activities without that invocation. And we saw that in LA. The Marines were deployed, but they weren't allowed to detain anyone, for example, or make arrests. But I will say, I don't even know that this is Donald Trump as much as it is Stephen Miller and those around him. I don't think Trump cares. I think Trump is just saying, you know what, we got elected. Here's kind of the keys to the kingdom. Those around me can do whatever they want. I don't think Trump knows that's why you see Trump coming out and saying, oh, well, for farm workers, we're going to protect our farmers. And then the next day you have a helicopter landing in the middle of a farm in California just yesterday to refuel ICE supply. So I don't think he even knows 80% of what's happening in his own administration right now.
Yeah, he doesn't really. It was interesting that week that he came out and said, "Oh, we're not going to go after the farm workers." Right? The farmers were there in Washington D.C. Doing their legislative week, right on the Hill. They went to the White House because I actually the group that came to see me, and I actually told them, you need to go talk to the guy in the White House over there. That's the one. I'm on your side advocating with you. You need to go convince him. And they said, well, we already did. We have already been there. And the next day it came out with, oh no, we're not gonna go after the farm workers. We're not gonna go after hospitality workers. And then 2 days later, like you said, he's got Stephen Miller back in his ear again, who made him kind of switch the way, and everything went back to the way that it was. He's it's like watching a tennis match with him, right? Whoever's in his ear, he's one way looking this way, and then somebody else comes around, and then he kind of switches his opinions and attitude going the other way. So as soon as those individuals were gone and Stephen Miller's back in his ear, it's back to the way that it was, and it is. It's it's just such a hateful person that this person is. And they had an article about him in the LA Times, actually just a couple days ago, Stephen Miller, just about how Santa Monica is apologizing for the fact that he grew up there, and like how did this individual become like such a hardened conservative and develop these views in which is such like a beach kind of progressive community. And but it is, it's just the fact that it said in this article that one of his friend, he had a Latino friend in middle school, and basically told him when they got to high school, we're not going to be friends anymore because you're Latino. I mean, how hateful
Yeah, I
is
mean,
that?
I'd understand it. If I woke up and looked in the mirror and saw Stephen Miller every single day, I would also be pretty upset at the world. Donald Trump said it himself. If there was 100 million people in this country, or if there could be 100 million people in this country, Stephen Miller would deport everyone else, and they would all look like him, which sounds like a nightmare. But ultimately that is his goal, and I think that that's something that I haven't really heard people talk about as much. Is the mastermind that Stephen Miller actually is. A lot of this stuff, I mean, even going back to Trump 1, Stephen Miller has been the one that has been kind of steering the boat and really driving the actions that Trump does. I do agree with you, Representative. I think if a 20-year-old were to come in and say something to Trump before he makes a final decision, that it would have the greatest impact as opposed to any of his advisors. Mm-hmm. I'm really saddened, disheartened, but not shocked by what's going on, particularly in Florida right now. I have this clip of someone, in Alligator, Alcatraz, talking about their experience there that I would love to share with both of you. Max, if we could pull that up. Yeah, this is someone's report of it.
Alligator Auschwitz has been open for 5 days. I am Leam Sela Figuera, We've been here at Alcatraz since Friday. There's over 400 people here. There's no water to take a bath. It's been 4 days since I've taken a bath. They only brought me a meal once a day, and it had maggots. They never take off the lights for 24 hours. Mosquitoes are as big as elephants. You're not respecting our human rights. You're human beings. You're not dogs. You're like rats in an experiment. I don't know their motive for doing this. If it's a form of torture, a lot of us have our residency documents, and we don't understand why we're here. I'm on the edge of losing my mind. I've gone 3 days without taking my medicine. It's impossible to sleep with this white light on all day. They took the Bible I had, and they said, here, there is no right to religion. And my Bible is the one thing that keeps my faith, and now I'm losing my faith. This was reported by CBS
We can
News.
cut it there. One thing that I want to focus on there is that they're taking our faith. This is something that I genuinely do believe is an objective with all of these actions that they're doing, that they want to take our faith away from us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, here's the thing. That's a First Amendment violation, right? It doesn't matter whether you're documented or undocumented. You have a right to freedom of religion in the United States of America. The Constitution protects everyone in America. The Supreme Court has made that very clear. What's happening in Florida, and it actually is personally hurtful for me a little more because I am from Florida. I've been to the Everglades multiple times. That's not a place you want to get stuck in. Like that is a very brutal part of Florida. It's a swamp. And it goes back to what the congressman was saying earlier. I think cruelty is the point here. They want to make it extra cruel to potentially deter others. But I don't know if you saw, there was an Orlando Sentinel article that came out earlier this week that showed that a DACA recipient was actually sent there. And when you're talking about the worst of the worst going there, you now have a DACA recipient who the only reason why he was actually ever detained was because he was cited for driving with a suspended license. It wasn't a violent crime or anything, and he was improperly cited. He wasn't the one supposed to be cited. Someone else was, but his name it was mixed up legally, and now he's in the detention facility. I just think that ultimately it is cruel. It is unusual, and a lot of. I mean, here's the thing. I would guess that a number of courts, if you have a regular prison facility built, not a nice facility, a regular prison facility built in the way this one is in the Everglades with the same conditions, may find the conditions cruel and unusual and violate the Eighth Amendment. I really think that you'd have a number of courts. I don't know about the Supreme Court, but a number of courts would actually probably find that. So it's concerning. It really is.
Yeah, I want to go back to this, the DACA recipients. Representative, for the listeners that don't know, could you explain this program and a little bit of the history and what it does?
Well, you know, the DACA program, right, was kind of started there during the Obama administration to kind of allow individuals who've been here, came in undocumented through no fault of their own, but have, you know, basically been lawful, in good standing, you know, young individuals, originally how it started, right, that were allowed to kind of stay here and to go, and they could go and look for a job. They could go to schools. They were able to receive some of the benefits, right, as DACA students, and they had to continually apply. They had to check in, and they had to do the things that they had to do to make sure that they were in good standing and able to do that. You know, one of my colleagues from grad school was a DACA recipient, young man, again, who was brought here through no fault of his own, right? He was brought here as a young individual, but this is his country. This is where he grew up. This is where he's worked to kind of make a difference and do that. And that's what the DACA recipients are, right? They want to be able to serve in the military. They want to go to school. They want to be able to work. They want to make contributions. They want to be able to go and do things that other people are, right? And this is the only home that they've known. So that's really what the DACA program is. And again, this is something that Trump, I think, promised. No, he promised in his first term, and I think he said he wanted to take care of them again here in the second term. But somehow I'm not thinking this is kind of what the idea was, what people thought when he said he was going to, you know, be receptive to them and kind of take care of them and find a path for them.
Yeah, no. and if I'm understanding correctly too, with DACA recipients, I mean, the vast majority of them are people that came here, were brought here rather. They did not come here. They were brought here by their
Right.
parents.
Right.
They had no say in the matter. If you're a
Mhm.
kid, you're not going to stay in your home country. You have to follow your family.
Right.
And some of them don't even speak the language of the country that they immigrated from. I mean, typically it's Spanish. If I'm not mistaken, I think all DACA recipients would, be Spanish speakers. But another component of this is, or presumably Spanish speakers, a lot of them just speak English rather. Another component of this is, if I'm not mistaken, there's like requirements. Like it's not just that you have the opportunity to go to college or you have the opportunity to go get a job because you're a DACA recipient. You have to do these things if you want to continue to be a DACA recipient. So not only are they not the worst of the worst, we know that they're the
Right.
best of the best.
Yeah, they're not like, they want to portray this image of all these, undocumented individuals as gangsters, bad people, criminals who are coming here just to kind of, rape and pillage, as they say, to steal and do whatever it is that they can to try and get ahead. Right? They're all part of the car. They all belong to a cartel. They're all bringing in drugs, and that's just not the case. And that's, I think that's why you're seeing they're going after, right? They said they're going to go after the violent criminals, but the fact is, there is not as many violent criminals as they think there are, or that they were trying to portray to the American public. So now it's just become a matter of like, well, let's just get whoever we can get.
Yeah, and I think another component of this that is particularly interesting to me, and you touched on this, is how MAGA is kind of getting upset at Donald Trump for even proposing amnesty or for even suggesting that maybe farm workers, there could be some type of pathway. The first one that comes to mind here, and I don't love bringing them up because I don't think that they deserve any attention, but I will for the sake of this conversation. Nick Fuentes, who is a Nazi and deserves to have no platform, recently went on one of his programs and was talking about how he thinks Kamala Harris would have been better than Donald Trump at this point, which I, again, don't want the endorsement of him, but it's telling something, and the same thing happened with Joe Rogan. The same thing is happening with Tim Dillon. You're seeing a lot of these manosphere personalities, if you will, start to backtrack, start to go towards this enlightened centrism. And it's really interesting. And my question for you, Aaron, is, going back to the discussion of, obviously there was people who are married to immigrants that voted for these programs that ultimately were against their interests. There's people who are on Medicaid that voted for this administration, which is obviously against their interests. What do you think is the solution moving forward to bring these people back? Because I see a lot of people, particularly on the left, who ostracize these people and push them away and shun them. And I think that it's okay. I understand the upset. I understand the anger with it as well. But I think if we're looking at the long-term solution, what are we ultimately trying to achieve? We have to envision that they're going to return to being normal members of society who can contribute something of value. Time for a quick message from our sponsors. This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our elected officials is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start this conversation from the perspective that the loudest voices in the room aren't the most popular. You have the far left, you have the far right. They're the loudest by far online. They're not the most popular. You have the 80% in the middle that are much more popular in terms of ideology. I think another point to this is I don't know necessarily that we have to bring them back so much as so we just have to bring out the voters that we already have, right? A lot of people sat out in 2024. If the Democratic Party had the same turnout in 2024 that it did in 2020, Kamala Harris would be president and wouldn't have been a close race. So I think a lot of it was turnout, a lot of it was messaging. And then I do think part of it is now Democrats really have an opportunity to reach across the aisle to kind of center and center right voters who do feel a little I wouldn't say reach the manosphere, because I don't know that you're ever going to, until the Democratic Party is cool again, you're not going to win over those voters. I think that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that there is an opportunity now, especially after the budget bill, which is deeply, deeply unpopular in every single poll, to reach out to folks who may feel like, hey, I don't know if what I'm seeing right now out of Washington, D.C. is what I really want or what I voted for. Maybe we do want to check on Trump's power. Maybe we do want at least a Democratic House. And I think if you elect a Democratic House, you turn Trump's 4-year term into 2 years. He can't do anything anymore. So I think that should be the priority. And I think reaching to folks across the aisle right now should be a priority. And it should be done by across the country.
Yeah, I want to play devil's advocate here for just 1 second, because I saw the CBS report, or I think it was CBS that reported, maybe it was CNN that did report it. And I'd love to hear your take on it, where they were talking about voter turnout, and if voter turnout had been higher, that potentially Kamala Harris still would have lost the election as a consequence of her not appealing to particularly like minority demographics and younger men. Do you buy that argument? Do you think that that's...
Yeah, I mean, so my argument is couched in the idea that if Democrats had the same turnout that they did in 2020, in 2024, she would have won. I'm not talking about turnout as a whole, because if turnout as a whole was up, I do think Trump would be president still. I really think that there was very few, if anything, could have stopped what we have right now. I mean, I think he was kind of destined to win, and I actually thought he was going to win for most of 2024. I think ultimately turnout is important. I think if Democrats have a unified message, and if Democrats have a unified leader, which right now Democrats do not. I don't know who the leader is of the party. Until we get there, it's going to be tough sledding.
You know, it's one of the big negatives, right? The bad thing about kind of being the minority, or being the party in the minority, right? Especially with not having the White House, right? When you have the White House, it's, you know, everybody knows who the leader of the party is, right? It's the president of the United States. I think kind of what happened with Republicans, right, is they had Trump, you know, kind of emerge as their leader during the 2016 election, remain their leader during 20, and even though people thought after he lost in 20 he would kind of fade away and go away, he didn't, and he kind of stayed on as the party leader. So even during that period of 4 years where they weren't in the White House, they still had Donald Trump in a way kind of unifying and uniting the party kind of in that way, to kind of bring people towards him and support him. That's just kind of carried into right here, you know, post the 2024 election. Whereas right now, like you're right, Aaron, the Democrats, we don't have, right? We're not in the White House. We don't have a leader. We have... and this is the thing that people always, I don't think people don't really get, right? Is you have the DNC, you have the DSCC, and you have the DCCC. They're three different organizations, all kind of geared towards kind of their own objective, right? The DCCC, which I am a part of, right? You know, we want to make sure that we can take back, you know, the majority in the House of Representatives. The Senate is focused on the Senate, and the DNC is focused on trying to win the White House. And even though there's a DNC chair, he does not roll over the other entities, you know, of the party, right? The DSCC and the DCCC. And so there is no kind of unified message, and there really kind of won't be one until that leader emerges that we kind of start to see, which will eventually happen during the presidential primaries. Right.
And I will say this: I don't think Democrats need a leader right now.
Yeah.
Like I firmly believe that the best opposition to Trump is no opposition. Give the voters what they voted for. Let them see what they voted for, and they are seeing it. Right? They're not having a good response to it. If you go back to 2020, what was it? 2021, after Biden won, Republicans spent the first 6-7 months of their tenure at leading the House against, or I don't even know if they may have been in the minority, but they spent the first 6-7 months after the loss talking about Mr. Potato Head. Like they didn't have a unified message. They didn't. I mean, they had Trump, but he was kind of in the background a little bit after January 6th. This wasn't like, and they still won in 2022. There's still plenty of time.
Yeah, no, there is. I think right now more important, right, is like some of the things, the polling and things that's been brought to us and that we've seen, right, is that what people aren't liking right now is the fact that, there's no fairness, right? And when you talk about the one big ugly bill, um, that it's out there, right? People are losing their health care. Um, the biggest tax break is going to the ultra wealthy. While working people are going to be suffering to have to work harder. Um, the no tax on overtime is a facade, same as the no tax on tips. And they're only temporary. These are only temporary to last until Trump gets out of office, which would be like around 2028 theoretically. Um, but and even like that individual I mentioned in the article earlier, right? It's they want to ensure that there's fairness and respect. And the fact that they're not seeing this right now from the Trump administration, I think, is going to play a big role, um, going forward for the midterms. But it is something that we, I think, as Democrats, have to take advantage of and really kind of emphasize that there is no fairness in this bill. And I think one of the things that they did, right, all the so-called good things that they think they put into the bill are going to take place immediately. Like, right, they want to be able to advocate the tax on tips, and even though they're sending the wrong message, there's going to be no longer a tax on Social Security, which is completely false. It's only a tax break that they gave you, again, a temporary one until he leaves office. All the bad stuff, especially around healthcare, doesn't actually start until after the 2076 midterms. But it's going to start having an impact now, and that's like one of the things that I did this week, right? Was I went and visited a hospital to really kind of talk, in my district, 40% of the people in my district receive Medicaid, or here in California, as we call it, Medi-Cal. But it's going to have a huge impact, right? Not just on those Medicaid patients, but it's also going to have an impact on the rising cost of insurance and medical costs for everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get back to something that you said a little bit earlier, Aaron, particularly with kind of like letting the Trump administration I think Chuck Schumer took a similar approach where eventually the fever is going to break. His favorability is going to drop to a certain point, and then that's going to convince people to vote for the Democratic Party. My concern is, do you think that that's the case? Do you think that ultimately, naturally, people are going to return back to the party? Or do you think that there is something that the party has to do to, as you said, make themselves cool again?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. I do think ultimately that the country is like a pendulum. It swings, right? Like you go through phases. We swung very far to the right. I think the country will correct itself a little bit in the midterms. I think we may see another overcorrection in 2028, depending on how far right we really do go. I think a lot of it is it goes down to turnout during elections. I think elections are very fickle. And also, like, what wins you in the congressman's seat won't necessarily win you in New York City or in Wisconsin's third, which is a battle. I mean, like, there are so many. Every race is a very unique thing, so it really just depends. Candidate quality, turnout, etc. I think ultimately, as far as winning back voters, will be more important in 28 in a national presidential election rather than in individual voters or in individual districts in 26. Because I think, for example, someone like Rebecca Cook in Wisconsin's third can win that seat, even though because she is so connected to the community and she can flip that seat, even though traditionally it's a more kind of conservative leaning seat. Whereas you look at other districts and her politics may not play well. So I think it really just depends.
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? Definitely local. And I used to kind of say in my last, my last congressional seat that I held, which was a purple district before the one I'm in now. I used to joke around that like I could win an AOC seat, but she couldn't necessarily win in mine here in California, right? That was kind of along those lines. They're very, very moderate kind of leaning right. And again, right, it is very important there, I think, to kind of, as you said, Aaron, to borrow the phrase from Tip O'Neill, right? All politics is local. And in these congressional races, it really is about local issues and things that are going on. Now, look, there may be some national issues that really kind of grab the attention locally, but it really is going to come down to how you're serving the community.
Yeah, I saw an interesting conversation between Ezra Klein and Chris Hayes the other day on one of Ezra Klein's podcasts, and they were talking particularly about the social media strategy, or the media strategy broadly of democratic politics. And this is something that I'd be interested to pick both of your brains on, because one of the things that I saw them discussing was what you were getting at a little bit earlier, Representative, with the DCCC and with the DNC and with the DSCC. Is that correct?
Hmm.
These three different organizations that function separately from each other. I don't know if this is true. I'm basing this off of what they said. But one interesting thing is that they said the traditional campaign strategy has always been to raise money and then spend that money on TV advertisements. And the way that candidates have been selected is who do they think can raise the money to then spend that on TV advertisements. And they're saying that maybe the calculus is starting to change because of social media. Do you think that this is the case, or do you think that it's going to continue to kind of be this older strategy? Representative, I throw the question out to you first.
Um, I think we got to see that first, right? I don't know if it's kind of played out like here and there a little bit, where somebody kind of hasn't, I mean, we'll use AOC again, right? She wasn't she wasn't the big fundraiser in that race, but yet she was able to kind of go and use social media and do other things to kind of help her, win that race. But I say right now that's still like an outlier. For the most part, right? The individual that actually is able to raise and to go and present themselves is the one who's going to be able to kind of make the bigger argument to the people, right? Because you can't, as much as they say like, oh, you got to get out and knock on the doors, right? And you're going to do that. You got to do that when you're running. You can't knock on. There's no way you can go out and knock on 500,000 doors. So it's how do you get your message across, right? And I think now, while digital is definitely becoming a bigger aspect, like in my last race, like my first congressional race was so much focus on television, right? And the LA media market. We had to get out there and we had to spend, we had to raise to be able to put ads on television. My last race, it was more, we didn't do any television at all. It was pretty much an all digital market, right? Which was cheaper. It allowed us to be more targeted. It allowed us to kind of go get into like people's homes, to kind of go direct to them rather than have to go to the overall spectrum. So I think that kind of allows you, the fact that it's less expensive, at least it is right now, right? Until people start using it more, then it'll probably increase. But the fact that you can be more targeted, that it is less expensive, it does kind of present you a benefit. But your ability to go out and to raise money is still like a big aspect of being successful.
Yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree with the congressman completely. I mean, I do think digital is the future, but I think that campaigns need to be well-rounded. A good campaign is one that has a really good digital strategy organically, that has a really good paid media strategy, that has a strong on-the-ground presence. You have to have everything. You can't win a race just by running TV ads or just being on social
Yeah.
media or just having a ground game. You have to do it all. And so I think it's important that we get rid of the old guard consultants who make money on mail and TV only, and bring in some more folks who are kind of more well-rounded and focusing on the bigger picture here.
And to your point, Aaron, I will say that the ground game is so important, right? And
Yeah.
And that's not just, people think it's like, oh, just getting volunteers in and being able, sending them out to go knock on doors, but there's so much more to that. And actually, our ground campaign was a big part of our budget when I won in 2018. It was a big part of our budget in the primary to get me ahead out front in this last election in 2024 that we focused on. That my opponents didn't really spend any money on that, but we actually had paid individuals that were out there that would go out and knock on doors, that would make calls, that would do things in order, because as much as we love volunteers and they were out and look, they came out to me in force in 2018, they were bringing them in by the busload. It's not always something you can rely on. And so having that ground game out there focused on there, and there is, it costs. right? All this costs, right? So even, even if, because they have to organize your volunteers as well, right? You're paying these individuals to organize your volunteers to make sure that they're coordinated, to get them out there, that they have the messaging right, that when they go out and knock on doors, what they're going to talk about, that they're going to talk about this individual that they're supporting that's running for office. All of that costs money, and you still have to go out and raise in order to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that obviously when we're talking about digital campaigns and digital social media strategies, and really the comparison point between the two, I have been, again, and this is based off of the conversation that Chris Hayes was having, who just released a book talking about actually the media attention and whatnot. Him and Ezra were having this conversation about how this unfolded in New York, and I was just particularly interested in more of the media strategy. Obviously, there's the policy, but just sticking on the media strategy, I think it was particularly interesting how the media strategy did lead to the volunteering and the fundraising. So I'm curious about this grassroots approach, Aaron, where you had Zoran, he was able to raise $8 million, and he told his donors to stop donating, start canvassing. And then he transitioned, and they were able to get 10,000 canvassers out.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to have to hop off after this question, but I will say this. I think Zoran is a little different in that New York campaign finance rules actually prohibited him from raising more. You could only spend a certain amount as the campaign without outside support from like PACs and stuff. So I think $8 million was the cap. He couldn't actually physically raise more. He'd have to give that money back to folks, which is why he was like, stop giving me money. I think Zoran's race is a very interesting one. It's one that works in New York City, doesn't work in Kansas or Michigan, or may not even work in Southern California. It's a very unique race. He ran a very good race. He was also up against an opponent who didn't really run a race. Andrew Cuomo didn't really run a race, and who had a lot of baggage himself. So I think Zoran's is a very interesting test case that I would like to see replicated, just to see if it works in somewhere that isn't New York City, because I don't know that it will. He had better messaging. He had a policy platform that resonated with folks even more so than his opponent, even though his policies may not be ones that he could actually do as mayor. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see how, if he wins in November, how his tenure kind of goes.
All righty. Well, I know you have to get going now, Aaron. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll have you on the show again at some point.
Would love to. Great to be here with you guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, Aaron. Really do appreciate it. Tell your wife I said hello, and
I will.
All right, and stay in touch.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, raise high as well.
Yeah,
GW.
Raise
There
high.
you go.